As soon as next week, they say Trump may launch his next bid for the presidency, upending our politics and the current dynamic that I'm about to speak about. But it's important, this moment in time is never memory hold, because perhaps the day may come in November 2024 or in 2028, but Trump eventually will be gone from our lives. The people who he saved last time around will have to confront once again what their lives really did look like without him. This week is kind of perfect. Last week without Trump to consider the state of our news business. In the span of 72 hours, 3 of the major networks announced major cuts across the board, revealing how pathetic their underlying business and viewership really is. Each of these instances in their own right tells us a lot about how much our culture and population has changed and how little trust that these major networks retain. Let's start with Shepard Smith. I gotta say this, I got nothing against the man. He was actually good at Fox News, only at breaking news. But when he dramatically left the network in 2019, it was considered a major shock. He effectively anchored the breaking news credibility of the Fox News brand. Smith was paid some $20 million a year, considered an essential person with a lot of credibility. And then something interesting happened. He was picked up by CNBC under the presumption he has a ton of credibility, he'll add a lot to the brand. He debuted a primetime show in September 2020. And what happened? Absolutely nobody cared. It turned out Smith wasn't nearly as powerful as people thought he was. He didn't really have an audience. He was just good at narrating a car chase or whatever to do in the event of a hurricane. His low-rated show flopped from the beginning, becoming effectively irrelevant in the 2 years that it was on the air. Even when it was canceled, the only thing noteworthy about it was that it was finally canceled. So why is that important? Because it shows that the so-called stars really aren't stars at all. Their high paychecks more reflect insane market dynamics of a dying business than they are any worth to actually bringing real people's lives. Next on the list is a funny one too. Tiffany Cross, straight up canceled on MSNBC. Cross, too, is a great example of the dying cable news business. Cross is just a racial shock jock in the mold of Joy Reid, just not as good at it. She says incendiary things about how awful and racist America is. She gets paid big bucks to do it. She hosted a Saturday show called Cross Talk, actually on cable, but more importantly, she hosted an online show on Peacock TV. Now, most of you know Peacock for The Office or for Yellowstone, but don't forget, NBC also was trying to figure out how to make streaming news work on their platform. They hired Mehdi Hasan and Cross in a bid to compete with shows like ours and appeal to younger people. They cross-promote their online shows on the major news channel in the hopes that people will come over. But guess what? It didn't work out, did it? NBC has never released the numbers for Peacock shows, but considering that Cross left and no one really cares, even Hasan's show, of course, is irrelevant, as is the former White House aide, Simone Sanders. Their bid to compete in news streaming is a failure. Cross was a great reflection of that. They're discovering that when people have actual choice, like what they do not have on cable, then their real feelings about their lack of credibility really comes out when they don't watch. And finally, my personal favorite, CNN. First was Jake Tapper, the so-called rock of CNN. I'll say this, I guess he's better than the rest of them, but he's a lot like Shep Smith. He's good at the news. At actually getting people to want to watch, turns out, not so much. Tapper flopped in the brief experiment with primetime, drawing only 450,000 viewers in total, a fraction of that in the key demographic. Even people in the cable news business who are used to having only old people watch described it as, quote, abysmal. The network claimed that he would have returned to daytime as always planned after the midterms, which is laughable. They hailed his placement there as a big move for the brand, which was all about the news and had all the intentions of making it permanent. They only backtracked after they realized how awful the numbers were. Then, of course, Don Lemon. Trump once aptly named him as the dumbest man on television, and he is fulfilling his promise in the debut of his new morning show. The numbers on this one are so low, it is difficult to believe. As Puck News' Dylan Byers writes, quote, the inaugural episode drew 387,000 total viewers, 71,000 in the 25 to 50-year-old demographic, numbers that are significantly lower than the last incarnation of CNN's New Day. Media executives described it to me by turn as, quote, brutal, humiliating, an abject disaster. All of that comes on the heels of bad news for CNN, whose new parent company, Warner Bros. Discovery, has $60 billion in debt. And now they have to cut 10% of their entire budget at CNN, with $100 million required in savings just this year. Hundreds will be fired. Many anchors and talent could lose their job. I don't cheer any layperson losing their job. But when Don Lemon's show eventually does get canceled, I will be the first one laughing. Again, I'm doing this as an important reminder. Without Trump, these people are dead men walking. They will get their boost again. The boomers will come back, let's be clear. But by the way, also, don't think, I'm not sparing Fox. They too are just as pathetic in their ratings in the key demographic. Their numbers may be higher overall than CNN or MSNBC, but their reliance on older viewers is somewhat even more of an existential threat. Their boomers too will come back for Trump, and that squares the circle. All of these networks got a huge lifeline in the time of Donald Trump, but the best he was a Band-Aid that could stop the bleeding. The writing was on the wall in 2015. Today, it is even bolder than then. Put this monologue in a time capsule. Remember it. Over the next few years, you're going to see a lot of people in the industry crowing about how the people who predicted their demise came too early. In the reality, it all rests upon a figure who's now much bigger than all of them, Trump. And when he eventually leaves, the bill for their obsession with him and the sacrifice of their credibility will truly come due. And I'll be laughing, and probably in the interim few years too, because the end of cable is just a cause too great to be celebrated. And listen, I mean, it's actually
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.